This is deep dish, right?
Yeah, well, let's get deep.
So I'm going deep on both sides.
Brian, welcome to the platform. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me here.
It's campaign season. You know, you're running for General Sessions Judge Division 9. How are you feeling right now?
Exhausted. Am I allowed to say I'm exhausted?
That means you're working. That means you're doing something.
You know, going to law school at night, I got my MBA at night. I'm used to working full time during the day and then having insurmountable projects to go to upon completion. So just get out of the courtroom, hit up as many neighborhood meetings I can go to, organizational meetings I can go to, and then just doing the best I can for the campaign after that.
And so, like myself, you are a Nashville native. So, you know, we gotta treat each other special.
Absolutely.
Because there ain't too many of us lingering around anymore. So I'm curious, it just, how did you get into, law, right? What was that journey? What was that inspiration like for yourself? And I know it's probably, a long journey. And so if you want to condense this for us and give us the hot spots, that's fine. But I'm always interested on why candidates choose to get in this profession. I think that's just fascinating and to know that, background story.
That's a great question. I actually was 30 when I went back to law school.
Okay.
So I did not go straight through. I got my MBA first, worked in corporate America. Before that, I actually had the fortune of graduating college in 2008 or 2007, December of 2007. So then I get to enter the workforce in the world's worst economy since the Great Depression. And so I made that work, then got my MBA, joined corporate America, did not like it, just was not for me. And I got into consulting on one of my consulting projects. It was like the first one, I think. Our client receives a letter from an attorney threatening to sue them for what I just implemented. And I was like, I did it right. I know I did it right. Pull up the code. That's what it says. And they were just like, you deal with this. I went to call an attorney friend of mine, and I saw how expensive it was to get them to write the letter. So I wrote the letter myself. When we resolved that situation, I was like, this feels amazing. This feels powerful. Like, I love this. So then I started researching options, and we are incredibly fortunate to have a school called Nashville School of Law right here in 100 Oaks.
Right.
And I had made up my mind I was going to take the LSAT, and I was going to go to law school. And it makes me a better lawyer that I had that life experience for 9 years before going back to law school. So now when I deal with my clients, when I listen to them, when I talk to them, I feel like I have a much better connection because I had those jobs. I pushed carts at Costco. I started at the ground level. And so I understand how difficult it is to make it when you're making $11.50 at Costco.
Right. Now that's fascinating, and I'm glad you had that journey because that journeys like that build character, and it really helps you understand kind of more of community, right? And doesn't kind of make you this super elitist, that had this kind of elitist type of path, but you really know and understand like what's it mean to like be of the people and now like work with the people at the same time. So gotta appreciate those journeys. Now you're on a different journey, this campaign journey. And so I'm curious of your motivation on wanting to pivot out of, like private practice into, potentially judgeship.
So I want to help people. That's, when I got my law degree, just like when you get, your MD, right? You can be a plastic surgeon or you can be a, oncologist or a dermatologist. There's a million different things you can do with that degree. And law is the same way. I could have done, corporate mergers and acquisitions. I could have done big law. I could have done anything. And it probably would have paid more too. But I chose to go into criminal defense, and I chose to have a small practice that regular people could go to, that regular people could relate to, that the general public would feel comfortable working with. So I have some outlandish slogans, I have some fun advertisements because I wanted to help the most amount of people possible, not the most amount of corporations possible or the most amount of businesses possible.
Right.
And so to pivot from there, I've now done over 600 cases in General Sessions Court, most of them appointed, which means, if you've ever watched the show Cops, you have a right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one will be provided for you. Well, our public defenders are incredible. They do an unbelievable job, and they're stuck with some of the worst cases possible. And so they're busy, they're underpaid, they're overworked. And so what happens is when they can't take any more cases, then the judge, or it will say who from the private bar is willing to do this work at a discounted rate in order to help somebody protect their freedom.
Right.
And so I started my practice taking those cases. I was like, I'm here, Judge. I'll take those cases.
Right.
And so I can help, hundreds and hundreds of people a year as an attorney. But as a judge, I can help thousands of people a year. And so I watched my father, see and help a tremendous amount of people. And I was like, how can I emulate him? How can I bring his message to law? How can I, really give back to the community and help the most amount of people possible?
Right.
I can't do that as an attorney. I can do that as judge. And so that's why I got tired of complaining.
Right.
I got tired of just saying, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And I did something about it.
Right.
I got the signatures, and now I'm running for judge because I want to be a doer, not a complainer.
Right.
And so that's how that transition unfolded between lawyer to now wanting to be judge.
And so, in running for judge, you do have an opponent.
I do.
What makes you the better candidate to replace the incumbent for Division 9 in General Sessions?
And a good incumbent. I will, if you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or any of the messages that that come out from our campaign, they're all positive. And that's incredibly important to us, that we remain positive and that we can say, she's doing a good job, but I want to do a better job. And so I think my experience as a criminal defense attorney, with the sheer number of people that I've helped and the amount of cases that I've seen from the attorney side, from the representation side of people who need help, I'm coming in from a very different angle to this position than my opponent came in 8 years ago.
Right.
Now, she's going to have a lot more experience in General Sessions Court presiding over cases. But your experience as a judge and your experience as a defense attorney are very, very different when it comes to what is best for the people.
Right.
And I think that my experience as a criminal defense attorney and my ability to relate and get along with my community will make me a better judge of the people's court than my opponent.
So what does a courtroom look like with yourself at the seat?
Okay. Well, let's rewind that question one step, and I'm going to ask you a question. And you probably don't get asked very many questions.
I don't.
But I think that, and this is impromptu, this isn't planned.
Right.
But what does General Sessions do? What type of cases do they hear?
Right. So General Sessions here, I want to say it's a money limit, I want to say, but they do domestic violence cases. The mental health court, I believe, is ran by General Sessions judge. They also, I forgot the name of, like, if people don't mow their grass and cut their lawn, I forgot what that's called, but that's also broached and talked about in general sessions. What else is in general sessions? That's all I got for you right now.
Okay, so the reason why I asked you that is because very rarely do you run for something where you have to tell people what it is to begin with.
Right.
Because when people see general sessions judge, they're like, I'm law abiding. I don't do anything wrong. Why do I, how does this pertain to me? I don't even know what this guy does.
Right.
So first of all, let's talk about what it does, and then I'll talk about what it's going to look like if I'm sitting sitting on the bench.
Okay, that sounds good.
So, what is General Sessions Court? It's really got three components. You have the criminal side where you can handle any misdemeanor. Okay, so if it's a misdemeanor, from a bar fight to a joint to, you mentioned domestic, assault, to a petty theft under $1,000, if it's a misdemeanor, or it's a felony that the state is reducing to a misdemeanor, you can handle it in general sessions.
Okay.
If you're charged with a felony, then oftentimes that will start in general sessions, and you can do different things in general sessions to preserve evidence if you're the defense.
Okay.
So that's the criminal side. But it's a unique judgeship because you have the civil side and the criminal side.
Right.
So you go over, and you were exactly right. There is a limit. It's $25,000.
Okay.
So if you get in a fight with, your spouse, and they leave and they take the dog with them, and that was your dog, General Sessions Court. It's like Judge Judy on the civil side. And then you have evictions, and you have detainer warrants, and that's the technical term. Right. But it also is, if you let somebody borrow your car and they didn't return the car, you can be like, hey, I'm repossessing that car. They bought it on a payment plan and they do repos.
Right.
That's in General Sessions.
Got it.
So that's what's heard in this court. And it actually touches the most number of people possible. You got the DMV that touches everybody.
Right.
But General Sessions, you get a speeding ticket, you're there. It happens. So with me at the helm, I have radical ideas. Like, listen to everybody.
That's kind of radical these days.
It's crazy, isn't it? To just pump the brakes.
Right.
Don't have a rocket docket, and just listen. It's also my responsibility, and and Judge Sam Coleman does an incredible job with this, and I brag about him because it really is phenomenal. But he takes the first 3 to 5 minutes when he sits down, and first of all, he addresses everybody as friends and neighbors. That immediately disengages, right? Because they're terrified in there.
Right.
And then he explains, you're in General Sessions Court. On the civil side, he goes through all the rules of default judgments and who's responsible and what's going on. On the criminal side, he slowly explains that everybody in there has a right to an attorney, that everybody in there needs to know that right. Everybody in there needs to exercise that right. And then he goes through what the consequences are if you do plead. I mean, just very slow, but that doesn't happen in every courtroom.
Right. And
some of our judges just expect you to know what the process is simply because you're there. I had to go to law school to learn about that. So in my courtroom, it would slow it down, make sure that everybody knows exactly what's going on. And then if they want an opportunity to be heard, I will listen. I believe in redemption. I will serve with compassion. There's a stat here. I was just looking at you probably saw that I brought it, but the year of challenges, the fiscal report.
Okay.
Right? And it's like, what are we dealing with here? What's going on here? And you look at like the drug testing program. And in total for probation, almost 4,000 tests were performed with a 41% positive rate. So that's what we're dealing with.
Right.
And so I understand that that addiction is real.
Right.
I understand that not every positive test is created equally.
Right.
I understand that I wear a green coat, but there's people in white coats that, that have potentially, gotten people hooked on different drugs that they can't get off of now.
Right.
And it's really difficult to just stop.
Right.
And so you have to work with them. You mentioned recovery courts. I believe you mentioned mental health court, but you have veterans court, recovery, drug court, a mental health court. All of those general sessions, and different judges. I kind of champion different causes, and you push them through. But I believe just in a court that will slow things down, give everybody an opportunity to be heard, and lastly, try to come up with solutions that people can actually follow through on in order to have this be the last time they're in my courtroom.
Right.
Instead of, the word is recidivism, when it's like a hamster wheel and it comes back and comes back and comes back. And so and we'll get into that later, but it's just like, I want to make sure that they have a plan, a punishment. It's still punishment. But it's something that they can do, they can accomplish, they can achieve, and learn something from it, so maybe they don't do it again.
Right. Justice, right? Everybody wants justice, but that's a loaded word, and it can mean different things to different people. And so, as potential judge, I think it's important for us to know what justice means to you. And so can you break that down, what that means, and compartmentalize it for what it means for you sitting on the bench, and what justice is and what that looks like?
That's a huge question, and I don't know how much time we have.
We got time. That's what I say. It's a real loaded word.
It is deep. It is deep. And you have to understand, or not you as in
people.
People have to understand that there are three different silos when you walk into the courtroom. There's the judge, and the judge has to deliver justice. Then there's the state. Then there's the DA, the district attorney. Now, they have a sense of justice because they represent the state of Tennessee. And so in a criminal, case, it's not Joe Schmo versus Joe Schmo. It's the state of Tennessee versus Joe Schmo. So the state is the victim. I get punched in the face. I'm not the victim. It's the state of Tennessee versus that. So now this DA has to have justice for the victim, justice for the state, or justice for the real victim. Now, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I represent defendants in that courtroom. And sometimes the justice that I'm seeking for my client is at odds with the justice that the DA is seeking for their victim, and the judge is having to weigh those two,
Components
those
of
two
justice.
opponents, exactly. And so the judge is now having to, that's the hardest part, right? I'll use a very, very basic example. And that is, let's say that there's an Amber Alert, okay? And they're looking for an 8-year-old girl. They stop your car and they open up your glove box, and there's cocaine in there. Could an 8-year-old girl have fit in your glove box?
No.
So that glove box is outside of the scope of them just looking in your car for an 8-year-old girl.
Right.
But you did have a kilo of heroin in the car. So now you get arrested. Well, the state is saying they had a kilo.
Right.
I'm saying he did. You're right. But you can't go in there. That's an illegal search. You can't do that.
Right.
So now the judge has to be like, well, there's a kilo with his hands all over it, but there's a constitution over here and there's protections over here that says he can't do that.
Right.
That the state can't do that.
Right.
So my client should, in that case, be able to walk free.
Right.
Because of that technicality. Now, has justice been served? Half your listeners are going to say no. That's a bad dude spewing death in my community.
Right.
And you just let him go over a technicality. But then you have another half that's saying, I have a right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure. I have a right to leave me alone.
Right.
So they're champions right now.
Right.
And so as judge, what the hardest thing for me when it comes to justice is going to be when the defendant did something. The state has proved it. Mm-hmm. And now I'm trying to weigh, because I have, if it's an open plea to me or if it's a plea that they've come up with together. Now it's like, man, am I going to accept this? Is this enough?
Right.
Is this something that is going to make our community better?
Right.
And I really get aggravated as a defense attorney when the judge does not accept a deal that's been put together between the state and me. Because we know the facts, we've talked to the victims, we've talked to the police, we've talked to everybody involved, and we've come up with this package.
Right.
And then the judge says no,
Right.
for whatever reason. Then that's when I get really upset. That's when I'm motivated to run, because it's just like, no, the people involved figured it, worked out something.
Right.
And now you're getting in the way of a solution that is capable of being completed.
Right.
That's injustice. So I don't believe every stop is created equal. I'm a criminal defense attorney. There are stops that I just hate to see. I don't think everybody's treated equally when they do get stopped. I don't think that a lot of our systems in place have an equal effect on every single person. I think they're unjust.
Right.
However, as a judge, I can only change so many of those things. I have to keep them in mind.
Right.
But that's when it comes to your legislators, when it comes to maximum and minimums, when it comes to your legislators that made 0.5 grams of heroin, cocaine, and everything else a felony.
Right.
As a judge, I have to obey the law, and
so
that makes it hard.
So let's get into power.
Yes.
Let's get into power, because I'm glad you made that clear, because many folks may have unrealistic expectations of judges not understanding the power that you all have and don't have. So I'm glad you put that out there. But you do have the power of your voice. And so knowing that there are policies that are discriminatory towards particular groups of people, rooted in structural racism, there are policies that target poor folks. There are things that we know in this country that have just unjustifiably affected particular people. You cannot change those policies and laws while you're on the bench, but you do have a voice that, because you see these things, you will see these things in your courtroom, but you've seen them as a criminal defense attorney. How could you use your voice, maybe at the state legislature, maybe at council meetings, to maybe speak out against things that hey, this might be in particularly harming community. And even though I may not can write the policy or change it, but I can say something that may affect how a vote goes or don't go.
Wow. So power is the power is there. Mm-hmm. However, running for judge is pretty boring, because if you're running for Congress, if you're running for Senate, if you're running for a lawmaking office,
Right.
then you can have all these plans, all these ideas, all these all these reforms that you want to push through. But as a judge, I have to obey the law. I cannot legislate from the bench.
Right.
And I have to treat everybody fairly.
Right. Yeah,
And I like to add with dignity and respect and with a smile every once in a while. But you're really tied when it comes to making law.
Right.
We're general sessions.
Right.
We're not the Supreme Court. Right. We are not even a court of record. Right. So we are forced to obey the law. But this is where it comes in. This is where that power is can be used in two different ways. Remember how I would get upset if a judge did not accept a plea deal. Well, in my entire career, and I can ask many others, I've seen a lot of judges never accept a deal because it was too lenient. It was too light.
Okay.
But you know what I've never seen? A judge look at something and just say, I'm not doing this. Like, take it back. That's too harsh for this. I've never seen that.
Wow.
And for as many times as I get turned down on the other side,
Right.
It's like, hey, every once in a while, throw me a bone
Right.
that just says, hey, y'all go back and renegotiate this. So you do have that power. It's just never exercised.
Right.
Also, if the DA knows I can rubber stamp this, he or she on the bench is just going to say, okay, because they've never said no for being too harsh. What motivation do they have to make any changes?
Right.
They don't.
Exactly.
However, if they know that you got this innovative, fresh dude on the bench that you can actually throw something unique towards and be like, the sentencing guidelines are pretty massive. I mean, you can really come up with some pretty creative stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, let's try this instead and see if he'll take it.
Right.
And that would then allow the state and the defense bar to really come up with some innovative things and see if they work. And then if they do, then you can turn that courtroom into a test kitchen to be like, hey, we've just tried this alternative approach. It was successful. And why don't we try to find a grant for this? Or why don't we try to explore these options more?
Right.
But notice how never in there did I say lack of consequences.
Right.
And there's the justice component is if you do something wrong, there needs to be consequences.
Right.
They just need to be commensurate with the crime that you do. There just needs to be some correlation there.
Right.
But the power can be used for good. The power can be used to toss out things that smell bad, to toss out things that just don't quite make sense, to toss out things that are just like that just there's not enough there. Right. And I wish our DA would allow for more bench trials in general sessions. I wish that there was more opportunities to kind of let some of those stories be heard instead of everything being manufactured into a plea deal or into something. I would hope that the people in my court understand that, you know what, if you really want a fair shake, you have a great judge to just take this in front of, and he will be fair. Okay. And that's the biggest honor I can have as a judge is if a criminal defense attorney tells their client, look, that's unreasonable. Let's just take it in front of the judge because I trust his judgment. That's the kind of power I want. I want the kind of power that the defense bar knows that will be fair to the community.
Brian, you're from Nashville. Nashville is growing. Nashville is changing. People say it's the it city. Some people say it is not for everybody. Some folks say it's, two cities in one. I think you have a pretty good idea of maybe those two cities because of the 1,600+ plus cases you've been able to do throughout Middle Tennessee for indigent defense, and really being able to, be locked in and build relationships with communities that, maybe Nashville is not for anymore, one may say. Can you talk about a little bit about that natural growth and how that plays a part in the work you've been able to do within Nashville and Middle Tennessee, and how does that help you be potentially the next judge, and qualifies you to be the best judge for General Sessions Division 9?
So I am from Nashville. My father actually was in one of the first integrated classes at Meharry back in the 60s.
Okay.
My mother went to David Lipscomb Academy. And so I'm probably the only David Lipscomb Meharry combo here in town, I like to joke. But when my father came back in 1974, he set up his practice right there in Midtown and downtown, joined the faculty at Meharry. And but the biggest thing about that relationship is growing up, I was taught, I'm Jewish, but I was taught about inclusion and faith.
Okay.
Because both of those foundations were very important growing up, inclusion and faith. And my grandfather had a farm out in Antioch, near where Bell Road hits Murfreesboro Road. That farm was after we got eminent domain where we were on the Stones River over there where Percy Priest Dam is. And my mother grew up in Donaldson.
Okay.
So I mention that because I'm more Nashville than hot chicken. I know I have connections, family, friends from Jolton, where I went to summer camp at Camp Biota. Shout out to Eva Evans of City Pets on Jefferson Street, an awesome female-owned business right there in the heart of North Nashville. But I went to her family farm for summer camp on Marrowbone Creek. It was incredible. And then going to school here in Nashville, growing up in this place is an incredible place. I get why I was the city, because it was where everybody wanted to go. However, now, fast forward, after all those, even before, that's why I wanted to get in this type of law. But after those 600 indigent cases, even more so, you realize that it city was not it for everybody.
Right.
And we do criminalize poverty way too much. We do criminalize just the activities of survival way too much. And we have to reform how we address these issues because the laws may not change. I'm a judge. I can't change the law, but I can reform how I address them. Learning didn't come easy to me. Some people read and write, no problem. I struggled.
Right. I
had to go to a school called Benton Hall Academy. It's an incredible small private school for children who learn differently, and I learned how to learn. I have to see it, touch it, hear it. Takes me longer than some other folks, but I can get it done because I learned how to do that. And that was so important to me that I now sit on the board of that school. But I brag about that school. I talk about that school because those students get a real diploma, okay? And for most of them, it's their ultimate degree they're ever going to get. But that real diploma, you know why they're so proud of it? It's because they earned it. And they took the same SAT, the same ACT that you did. They took the same classes that you did. But it was fed to them in a different way that they could retain it, and then they could, regurgitate it back to you, which is all learning is and school is, right?
Right.
And so through my volunteering there and my being a student there, as a judge, I understand that everybody learns differently. And so then, therefore, shouldn't our punishments, shouldn't our orders identify that? Far too often we just have algorithmic law. You did this, this is what we do for those cases. You did that, this is what we do for those cases.
Right.
That can't happen. We have to have individualized justice.
Right.
And so the cash bond system, Let's say your bond's $2,500. You have to come up with $250.
Right.
You make $10 an hour, which is still, a lot above minimum wage. Right. We're not talking about that because I'm general sessions judge. But at $10 an hour, in order to have $250 to spend on bond, you got to work, 30 hours. 30 hours to give that bonding company $250 that you never get back.
Right.
Now, what if you drop that bond to $250 and let them make a cash bond? It's the same money, but guess what? When you show up back to court, you get it back.
Right.
So there are ways that you can still have bond have the same effect on the family, have the same motivation to make sure that that individual returns back to court, but that doesn't take their money permanently.
Question for you. There's been a lot of discussion as of late of whether bond is even necessary. Should there be a money amount on a human body? And because of wealth, because of privilege that some folks have to money, we can commit the same crime. $250 may be nothing to you. You're going to get out in a few hours. $250, that's my livelihood. And if I can't get out because I don't have the $250, period, I just don't have it. Whether I get it back or not, I just don't have it. Nobody in my family, peers don't have it to give. I may lose my job.
Oh, absolutely.
How do we get creative around those type of things? Around people being able to go to court without missing work. Being able to figure out if you don't have the money in general, and if it's not a heinous crime, let me go, and if it's, and like you said, these algorithms and statutes that say, hey, are you a danger to the community? And, what's your likelihood to come back to court? All these things that kind of dictate the bond that the night magistrates, they hand down most of the time. Like, do you see reason, and do you see a legal system that does do away with bond in general at some point in time for particular less heinous crimes, so non-heinous crimes or non-violent crimes? So,
boy, I thought you asked a big question earlier about justice. That was only that was a Cessna compared to this jumbo jet you just dropped on me.
Deep dish, deep dish conversations. We need to know.
That's what we talk about. It's in thin crust conversations. This is a deep dish conversation.
For sure. And I think you have a particular lens because of the people you have served. And that's why I think that's why I'm so curious myself to hear your thoughts on if there's a possible way to get creative with bond, and if we could just eliminate it possibly.
So there's a couple questions there.
Yeah,
so I'm gonna
break it down for us.
So I'm gonna break it down, and and if I forget any of them, just remind me because you brought up great points.
And you giving us a master class right now, just to let you know. So we're learning. We're learning.
You talked about missing, not missing work for court. Mm-hmm. Robin Kimbrough Hayes, another great attorney running for office. She talked about a night court. Mm-hmm. So you have judges that are talking about that. I get furious when my client is there and the state asks for a continuance because the officer's on in-service or the victim didn't show up. And I'm like, no. If my client wasn't here, it'd be an FTA, a capias, which means a warrant issued, and they go get arrested. Mm-hmm. But because they're not here, my client now has to miss another day of work, come at a future date. That's not fair. Right. So that's a huge issue to me because I can't miss a day of work. Right. I mean, it's crippling. Right. No matter where on the system you're working, mm-hmm. you miss a day, it hurts. Right. And with gas $5 a gallon and milk and eggs are crazy. Ridiculous. There has to be a better way. Glenn Funk doing a great job with reducing with playing with bonds and trying to figure out how it's always a moving target. Mm-hmm. You don't know who's going to recidivate versus who's going to go back to their job and they just had one bad day. Right. That's the hardest thing to determine. And the moment somebody does something bad, then the whole system comes crumbling down when, even if you had a 99.999% system, that still means hundreds to thousands get through that were mistakes.
Right.
Now, bond, it's everybody, when you go to a restaurant, some people start at 0 and work themselves up to a 20% tip. Other people start at 20% and work their way down to a no tip situation. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I think bond should start at ROR. And then, depending on what crime you committed, what infraction you may, they allege you committed.
And what is that ROR?
A release on your own recognizance.
Okay.
So it should start at, we're going to hold you for this cool down period, whatever it is, and then process you, release you. That should be the start. And then after they review your record, your tendency to or not to show up to court, the severity of your crime, the likelihood of you getting out and just doing it again. That's why we have a 12-hour hold for domestics, because if they just hold you for a minute and then release you back out, you're going to go right back to the place of the fight and keep it going. So you got to cool down. So you have to factor in, do they have a job? Do they have ties to the community? If you're just in from Kansas and you have no ties here, you have no reason to be here, why? And you're being charged with a crime that we won't bring you back for. It's like, why would you ever even come back?
Right.
So like there's different reasons why bond is higher and lower.
Right.
But working our way to what is something that's achievable, what is something that it's meant to be a motivation. Like if you don't show up, there's a sting.
Right.
And it shifts the burden from the defendant or from the state to the defendant.
Right.
Because with no bond, nobody would show up to court because there's no reason, there's nothing that's like holding over their head.
Right.
So now the sheriff would have to go out and find everybody to bring them back in. The bond brings them in. But you're correct when it disproportionately affects a large percent of the community. So I wish Nashville has a great fund that's set up in order to post bond for certain individuals.
Cash bail fund.
And yes,
Yep.
and then but talk about your sheriff. Talk about your clerk, your criminal court clerk. If you get arrested, now there's a paper trail, right? How fast does that citation then get to the sheriff, then get to the clerk, then get on a docket, then get you in front of a judge, right? Like a lot of different people touch that piece of paper between, the police car that night or day or whenever and court. So if those people are working together better, then then that time spent waiting, that time spent in that, if you can't make a bond, should be significantly lower than it is.
Right.
But I do commend Glenn Funk is doing a lot to try to alleviate that.
Okay.
But bond is tough because nobody wants to be held unnecessarily.
Right.
And you talked about jobs, losing jobs because of that. And that's a totally different topic that we can get into. And that is jobs. First of all, it's tough to get a job. Like even the unemployment is crazy low and everybody's hiring, but it's tough to get a good job.
With a livable wage.
Exactly. And so, and my definition of good and somebody else's definition of good, let's throw all that out. Let's just try to help people here.
Right.
And so to me, when I get an Amazon, warehouse worker or, just a mechanic or somebody, and we're talking anything above $15, $16 an hour right now is a good job.
Right.
And it's hard to replace easily. And so what ends up happening is you get caught. We talked about that 41% fail rate, right? And you get somebody who's arrested on something, let's say shoplifting. And it was something petty. They shouldn't have done it. They're on probation. Then they violate, and you put them, fail a drug test. They do something, and you put them in jail for 3 or 4 days. Or longer than that. because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They haven't done their class. So you just go straight to jail.
Right.
Well, now that person, like that, those couple days, they got kids, they got jobs, they have obligations. So then they may have lost their job, or and then you lose your job, you lose your house, and now you ain't got a house because you can't pay the rent, and you ain't got a job because of something that happened, and then what happens? You don't pay your court costs and court fines and court fees.
You don't have the money to.
So then what happens? They go after your driver's license because you haven't paid that, because they're like, well, if we take his driver's license, that's going to motivate him to pay it.
Right.
But guess what? Now with no license, you got a new job, but you can't get to it.
Yep.
Or you keep going to that new job, and then you get driving on revoked, to where you never get your license back.
Right.
So all of our systems are set up to just to feed this hamster wheel. And so that's why our judges need to take a step back, need to pull the layers off that onion, and they need to understand that just a couple days in jail can snowball into an absolute disastrous outcome. And if they pause for a minute and like, you know what would be better to the community? 24 hours of public service or 48 hours in the Davidson County, workhouse.
Right.
Nobody wants to go in there.
No.
How does that help you, me, the taxpayer of Tennessee? And so it's like, but if I can, but we talked about that justice. We talked about that punishment that needs to be there.
Right.
We have trash pickup. We have community service. We have the ability to make donations. I know that at one of the food banks we talk about, the DA that I work deals with to support that, it's a cash donation to that place, because for you to go out and buy cans and donate them, the cheapest is Aldi at 59 cents. Whereas if you gave them $1, they can get 5 cans for $1 instead of you spending, $1.50 on 2 cans.
Right.
So there are alternative things that we can do that would help local programs and give them volunteers, give them human workforces that are pro bono, because they're coming through the criminal the probation system.
And so we talked a little bit about this working you out of a job, right? If people didn't have to show up to General Sessions Court, it'd be a beautiful thing. However, again, judges are limited of capacity. But I would still love to hear your thoughts on what are some solutions in the front end that can prevent people ending up in potentially your court that we should be implementing in communities, whether it's housing, whether it's access to food, whether it's access to education, whether it's access to employment, access to things that are going to minimize a person from committing a crime that will potentially end them up in your court.
So first, I want to just end a couple myths. All right. First of all, casinos don't even have the cameras that Kroger and Walmart and everybody does at the self-checkout zone. All right. They're watching you, and they're watching you closely. The shadow scan, the stack one on top of the other scan, and no matter if it's $17 for food or $170 of Apple electronics, they are going to prosecute you no matter what. And they will send a loss prevention officer to court no matter what, and they will be there. So do not think that there's any amount too small, or if you're a teenager or young or old, they're not going to come after you. Retailers have taken a different approach, and they will. So that's number one. Number two, marijuana is still illegal in Davidson County, whether you like it or you don't like it.
Right.
And whether the district attorney, no matter what he chooses to do, if an officer charges you with it. But please, God, stop smoking in your car. Stop. Like it still is an illegal drug in Tennessee. And again, my opinion aside, it still is. And that smell is so loud. And it's so easy to be around that people get in trouble all the time because they don't think.
Right.
And it's just like, in that plain smell doctrine, again, no matter how you feel about it being, it is still law. And that is the number one way that people get caught with a million other things. It's from that plain smell doctrine. So just realize that it's putting you at risk. Third, window tint. If your window is tinted too dark, it is a probable cause stop every single time you get behind the wheel.
Okay.
So those are little preventable things that could stop a tremendous amount of unnecessary stops. Those are practical things. But we have to have better, like education is a huge component. Just, I hate when I get a client stealing food. You know, if it's a small client, Nashville does a really good job with that. If they're, you know, I don't even eat filet mignon every night. So if if it's Apple products and steaks, then you feel a little bit less bad because you know that they're not eating that. They're selling that in order to feed another problem. But then that's the biggest thing is mental health. Our legislators have to invest more in mental health. Our legislators have to invest more in the recovery courts, whether that's mental health, domestic violence, whether it's
drug addiction,
veteran court. All these courts do really good things, but they need funding and they need education. The food blight zones, like making affordable, edible, wholesome food available to all four corners of Davidson County. All of those things are important. All of those things just don't, that the General Sessions has to deal with.
Right.
I have to deal with the poverty problem, but I'm not given any tools to fix it or to fight it. I'm just dealing with the consequences of it. And so I would love to see better access to after-school programs. An idle mind is the devil's playground. They have to be able to see. One thing that I would really like to see is a better pipeline between Fisk, TSU, and Nashville School of Law. Because I think that no matter how much I try to get on someone's level, if I don't look like them, there's already a barrier there.
Right.
And I don't care if that's male, female, if that's racial, if that's ethnicity, if it's sexuality. However, we're different. When you lock in with your brother, it's a different kind of lock in than across the dinner table. No matter how much you care about everybody, there's that extra level of community there. And I think that I know that like Fisk and Meharry have a pipeline, but I think that you want to talk about helping different communities. It's getting more individuals, more shining stars from those communities to go to programs like Nashville School of Law that you can do at night, that are affordable. My law degree costs less than a Hyundai Sonata. Whereas, you know, you can get this degree and not buy a house with your brain. But if we had better pipelines to schools like NSL, I think that would also help every community because you could see that person from your class did that, or that person from your school did that, and then they go back and speak to. That's why I'm on the board at Benton Hall, because I tell those students every single day that like you can do anything you want, if as long as you put the work in, and but those kids have to see somebody that was in their shoes. That's the difference in empathy and sympathy. They have to be able to have walked in those shoes and know that you did it too, for them to truly believe that you can.
What is some of the biggest things you learned in those 600 plus cases what are some of the biggest things you learned about yourself? You learned about the legal system, about those affected by the legal system, and how do those things you learned kind of, you've carried with you, professionally and personally, from your journey, from your tenure?
Man, I had a judge tell me one time, you care about your clients more than they care about themselves. And that hit me a lot weirder than most things just, it's like a rain jacket. You're wearing Gore-Tex, you're good to go.
Right.
But that one penetrated. That one got in, but I didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. And so it was one of, when I get home and it's still eating at me and I'm trying to go to bed and what happened that day is still eating at me, that's when it's a bad thing, because it's like that's affecting my health. That's affecting my mojo. That's affecting everything. But then you're like, but why is it affecting me? Because it's messed up. Right. Like, that wasn't right. And so then it's like, no, I feel good about that. Like that nut in your stomach is from a good place. But what did I learn? I learned that you have to be able to separate yourself. You did not do this act that you're representing this person for. Okay. You didn't make that mistake, or you didn't put yourself there. So it's okay. But we have to deal with this. I learned that some people are truly apologetic for what they did, and other people are just like, give me my time. I can flatten that on my head and just let me out of here. And so you deal with those people differently. The ones that are just like, just give it to me. I know it's coming up. Let me, it's part of their process. It's a lot less fulfilling, but you do it for them. But the biggest thing was when people come up and they say thank you, or when you see people out in the community, or you read on Facebook and somebody's like, man, that was my public defender. He did great. That's when you learn that you're making a difference, that you get that mail, and it ain't a lot, but you get the mail from the people that say thank you. I've learned that I've learned never to guess what the punishment's going to be, because it's like a business plan. The only thing you can guarantee is it ain't going to go, it ain't going to go to plan.
Right.
I've learned that I really like the stories. I really like the people. I really like the chaos. I really like the environment of Sessions Court, because it is the people's court. It's the formalities are out the window. The pageantry is out the window. And it's just real people getting down, just living. It's survival court. And knowing how hard it is on them, knowing that, you can read an article that says the 80% of people don't have $400 to cover an emergency. And then I'm like, $400, wow. And then I talked to my client, and we were going to object to a to a urine test. But in order to do that, he had to come up with $12 to get the spectrometer test, processed. And he didn't have it. Now, we stepped back, and I asked him, I was like, hey, we can have this spectrometer test done, and I can go find a waiver, or apply for something. And he was just like, nah, man, just,
Right.
I'd rather you be able to fight this as inconclusive than get the conclusive back, because then I ain't got to fight.
Right.
Then I'm guilty. So
Right.
so use that 12 to my advantage.
Right.
Let it be unknown. And so, and we laugh about that, and that's good that you got to chuckle, because is it unbelievably sad that he don't have $12? Yes.
Right.
That's a real reality that I deal with every day. However, when you step back and he's like, nah, dog, that's just going to waste time and waste everything, then you can chuckle about it and be like, well, let's just keep the process moving then. Like, let's just, you did it. You did it. So now let's look for some empathy. Let's look for some compassion. Let's try to fix this.
Right.
But man, I don't think I realized until I got into that seat just how tough it is for so many people. I won't even say so many Americans, because there's a ton of undocumented immigrants that that are just trying to go to work, or just trying to, support our economy, and get caught up in things because of rules from our state legislature. Right. I'm not taking a stance on immigration. I'm not, that has nothing to do with this court. I'm saying how this court interacts with those individuals who are actually far more compliant with the punishments in the small claims court that we deal with, and just don't want any trouble. Right. And so I deal with everybody. And so that's why I'd be a good judge as well, because I'm on the ground floor and I'm meeting with these folks every day and I'm fighting for them. And so my experience comes from fighting for them. So then when I do have the fortune of sitting on that bench one day, I will work my hardest to not forget that struggle that I had on the other side. And I will try my best to use that experience to be a just, to be a compassionate, to be a champion of the people from the bench, to where maybe in 8 years I don't have an opponent, because I've done such a good job that they model other courts after what we're doing. Right. They bring in others to see what we're doing, because we do it for the people.
And so as we close, I want to get into that 8 years. It's a long time, Brian.
It's a long time.
Hell of a long time. But it's a lot of time to get some work done and make an impact. And so what does 8 years look like with you as judge for the General Sessions Division 9?
It was daunting at first. It was like 8 years. That's 4 cycles for a U.S. congressperson. But it will take some time to understand the position. And so I think that the reason why it is so long is because it does take you a minute to figure out, where am I going to fall on these issues? I know what I thought I was going to do, but now it's in front of me. Now that's not working out. Now my utopia is gone. Now I understand why things are happening, and now I have to change my approach. Right. So that takes some time to get comfortable. But the thing that I like about it is it gives you time to be a judge. It gives you time to make those difficult decisions. Right. It gives you time to make those unpopular decisions, because you're not constantly campaigning. You're not constantly trying to raise money. Right. You're not constantly trying to raise awareness. You're not constantly, trying to please everyone. Right. You can actually do what you're elected to do, which is make some decisions that may not be popular at the time, but then over 8 years, people have an opportunity to see a whole collection of work. Right. And a whole body of examples of who you are. And if they were shorter terms, it wouldn't be as effective. Right. But 8 years also, to me, means stability. It means a stronger foundation in Nashville. It means a longer runway to make a difference. Right. And I want to make a difference. Making a difference takes time, especially if it takes money, because you have to get in the budget. Right. So the budget for next year, it's already been made. Right. And then the first year I'm in office, I'm still trying to figure out how to do the job, not how to create a new program within the job. Right. And then there's another budget meeting. Right. So now you're in year 3 when you're this is reality. And and that, like probably not a cool thing to talk about on a podcast before the election, but I'm admitting that no matter who you are, there's a learning curve. Whether you've been out 30 years or been out 3, it's a totally different gig.
Right.
But it can be done better. And so for the thought that I get 8 years to make a difference, 8 years before I have to campaign again, 8 years to make my family proud, make Nashville proud, make Nashville School of Law, Benton Hall, BGA, make the Jewish community, make all these different folks that are helping me. I get 8 years to make them proud.
Right.
Like, wow, that's powerful. Wow,
Yeah.
that's a huge, huge vote of confidence.
Right.
If I get your vote.
Right.
And that gratitude, I'll look somebody straight in the eye and say, like, thank you. Like, for your vote, for your belief in me for 8 years is massive. Like, that's huge.
Yeah, it is.
And I respect that privilege. I respect that power, and I want to use it positively and justly. And like I said, I just don't want an opponent in 8 years.
Right. Well, I appreciated this, Brian. I give all guests, this last statement to close out. And so I want to give you space and time to hit on anything else that, we didn't cover. You just felt dear in your heart that you want the listeners, the viewers to hear one more time, or just, hear for the first time. And then, of course, let people know how they can support you, and when early voting is, and then when is the voting date.
Okay. So early voting starts July 15th through July 30th. I believe there's 11 different locations. Howard School Building opens a little bit before the other ones do. Election Day is August 4th. And my name is Brian Horowitz. I'm from Nashville. I am running for Davidson County General Sessions Judge, Division 9. That is a county-wide race. So if you live in Davidson County, you can vote in my race. I'm on page 6 of the ballot, and it is going to be a 16-page ballot. It is going to be a big, big, big ballot. And so I hope that you take the time to go down and the time to vote, because it is important. Local, small elections make a giant difference.
Right.
You can find me at puthimonthebench.com, elect Brian Horowitz on Facebook, elect Brian Horowitz on Instagram. You can support our campaign by going to puthimonthebench.com or electbrianhorowitz.com. They both work. But there's a donate page. There's a volunteer page. There's a page coming with some Q&A about just different stances that we take on different things that are happening and why I'm running. But the biggest thing is follow our message, because we're a judge who can smile once in a while. We're a judge who wants to be the judge of the people's court. We're a judge who's down to earth. We're a judge who wants radical, crazy ideas like listen to everybody.
Right.
I wear a green jacket because it's fresh, it's holistic, it's new. And that's who I am. I'm fresh. I want holistic ideas. I want innovative ideas. I want my courtroom to be a place where people, where their lawyer goes, man, we're lucky we're in here.
Right.
This is going to be okay. We're going to figure this out. We're going to do something that's going to help you not ever be here again. Right. And so my goal, and this is going to sound crazy, but if you think about Tinder, if you think about Bumble, if you think about those apps, if they do a good job, you delete them. Think about that.
Right.
Match.com. If it does what it's supposed to do,
Right.
you delete it.
You should.
You should. Yeah. It's an innovative concept, right?
Right.
And so I want to be like that. If I do what I'm supposed to do,
Right.
you never see me again. If you do what you're supposed to do,
Right.
you delete it. It goes away. You never come back.
Right.
And that's how I want it to be. I really do want to make a difference. Right. And that's elect Brian Horowitz. That's HOROWITZ. And we really need, folks at the polls. We really need just volunteers spreading our message because it is unique. I'm young. I don't have the same friends in different places to spread my message. And so I love opportunities like this with you to just be able to just be heard by the community because that's who I'm going to be serving.
Yeah, no, thank you. And shout out to Becca, and thank her who was part of your team and your, social media team and everything else.
I have the best team ever. Caitlin Moss, my campaign manager, Rising 2L at Belmont Law School. I spoke to their class, guest lectured one time in the fall. She enjoyed it. She was like, I want to go to the jail. I want to go see how a street attorney practices.
Right.
And everybody at the courthouse was like, who is that? She's great. And I was like, well, she's about to be my legal intern because she's so awesome.
Yeah.
So she's there. Becca Cunningham is my girlfriend. She's doing a lot of our social media. She's I couldn't do it without her.
Right.
And then Kate Yoho, our treasurer, she is wonderful. She's doing a great job. I'm appreciative of everybody that's volunteered
Shout
for
out
me.
to the team.
The team is incredible. I couldn't do it without them.
Well, Brian, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your genuineness. I appreciate your Nashvillianness, and I think people are really going to enjoy this conversation and the things that you talked about, your diversity of thought, your perspective around social change. And that's what we explore here. So I appreciate you. Good luck in early voting and good luck on August 4th. And everybody, hey, you have it here on Deep Dish. He can't take it back. Go check out his platform and all his accounts on his website and everything, and definitely contribute any way you can if you are moved to do so after listening and watching this conversation. So thanks, Brian, and definitely want to have you back.
Thank you so much, and let's bring on the green.